Hello YouTube, Shadow Hero 90 here. As you can already tell, I've been doing this show for about 3 years at this point, and in addition to the reasons as to why I do this, which I brought up last year, I am now actually going to state a few more reasons why I do this. One of which is that the portrayal of men in movies and TV is essentially toxic. And I mean really toxic. Men are... To be honest, I can't believe that I'm one of the only very few people who legitimately thinks that this kind of portrayal is not only toxic, but completely unfair. Second of which is the fact that these cartoons are aimed at kids, and they do not send a good message. Most of the time, a lot of these shows are role model shows, and the characters exist for the sole purpose to be imitated, and yeah, in doing so, you send some really horrible messages. And the last possible reason I could think of is that not this, but all these shows are pushing a political agenda. To be more precise, the political agenda comes in the form of a princess character whose initials are J and B. I'm pretty sure you can figure out who I'm talking about on those initials alone. But yes, a lot of these shows, and to extension, a lot of these role model shows, are pushing a political agenda. And as a white heterosexual man, I really don't want kids being indoctrinated because it could lead to a bad future. In fact, I really hope some really smart boy sees this show and it actually gets him thinking about sexism, and it causes him not to be indoctrinated to the feminist agenda that a lot of TV shows, cartoons, and movies are pushing. Especially a certain movie that will go unnamed that used a princess character whose initials are J and B to push their political agenda. As much as this intro actually does seem like a bad rant about the negative presentation of men and boys in the media, this is completely serious, and these 3 reasons I gave for doing the show are actual reasons. Now, that being said, if you agree with me on this, that's good. So just sit back and enjoy the review. Okay, begin scene. Bart Simpson walks up to Ashley Graham, who is babysitting him and his siblings, and says, "So you're one of those chicks, huh?" Ashley Graham responds by saying, "Don't call me a chick." Lisa then throws in, "Sorry about my unenlightened brother. He will make the next few hours a living hell." Ashley then pulls out a video game. Bart stands there in awe, like an idiot. And she tells him if he does some homework, she'll let him play for 5 minutes. Bart says it isn't worth it, but he lacks the willpower to fight back. And then Ashley says, "You see, Lisa, males aren't hard to tame. They all follow their video cartridges," as she makes Bart slam himself into a wall. Now, in all fairness, I know this is meant to be over-the-top satire, but this scene alone makes me feel no sympathy for this cunt. I know that this is supposed to be a parody of a scandal that happened on a show, I think it was called Hard Copy. Begin scene. The Planet Express crew has just returned to Earth after a rock alien swapped their genders. Female Hermes wants to cuddle, but her husband says he has to get up 5 times a night to play Xbox. In this episode of Sexism in Movies and TV, I am going to be attacking the video game addiction trope. The harmful stereotype that all men are video game addicts, or at least play video games. Growing up, I was always offended by this. I don't play video games. In fact, I actually view video games in a very negative manner, and being mature for my age, I never really saw what was so fascinating about video games. In fact, from what I saw from TV, video games were essentially a poison. Not to mention the fact that my interactions at school with those who played video games was never good. To me, the fan base for video games, especially the Sonic fanboys, was them being just a bunch of immature, retarded, egocentric jackasses. A month ago, I reviewed the episode Marge Be Not Proud, in which Bart is so obsessed with a video game that he resorts to stealing. The Simpsons had already taught that stealing was wrong, and at this point I have no clue what they're poking fun at, but that's beside the point. That review was essentially meant to be a setup for this episode. And since I already reviewed that episode, I'm going to be reviewing 4 episodes of a certain cartoon starring the most heinous, immature, and obnoxious video game addict of all time, Johnny Test. Oh, and before I start reviewing, let me just say, this son of a bitch is the perfect example of, in a sense, how I kinda saw narcissistic, full of himself, greedy, entitled, and not to mention thinking about video games to the exclusion of nothing else, and you would have a very good idea of how I saw the video game fandom in the 1990s all the way up to the 2010s. Johnny Test would be a perfect example of that. Him and the unicorns from the episode of regular show, The Unicorns Have Got to Go. So anyways, on with the review. Okay, in the episode Fat Johnny, the latest Smash Badger game had come out, so Johnny goes to the game store and trades in all his games for the latest copy, and when the clerk tells him that he doesn't have enough credit to get Smash Badger, but he does have enough credit to get, I forget the name of whatever he had the credit to get, but it was a parody of Dance Dance Revolution, and he said that it combines girly dancing with exercise. So to insult him, because remember, Johnny's an entitled prick, he calls the clerk fat and makes fun of his weight. So anyways, Dookie warns Johnny about karma, but Johnny still wants money to buy the new Smash Badger game, so he makes a deal with Bling Bling Boy to test out his latest invention, which actually Johnny ends up inheriting Bling Bling's DNA and becoming fat. He then heads over to the game store, in which the clerk gets his revenge by then Susan and Mary make him into a rapper, and he gets lots of money, but is still unable to. And after Dookie spent the episode going on and on about karma every time Johnny Test lost his money or an opportunity to play video games, he runs into these 2 Girl Scouts who are taking donations to help kittens, and Johnny actually rejects them at first, showing how greedy and self-centered he is. but then eventually cracks, realizes Dookie is right, and gives the Girl Scouts his money, which somehow returns him to normal. I haven't seen the episode in a very long time, so this is an abridged review. In fact, all 4 are going to be abridged, because it has been over 15 years since I've seen most of this crap. So anyways, the next episode up on the chopping block, in case you haven't already figured it out, is Johnny-Mon. The episode follows the standard going into a game rules that you have to win in order to go back. And because the plot of this piece of crap is rushed, they end up in the final round of the tournament battling Blast Ketchup, who's a parody of Ash Ketchum, and in which Johnny gets the latest Tiny-Mon game, and this time Blast Ketchum has them pulled into his world. He captures Johnny's dad and Dookie somehow, and tells them that if they want them back, they have to battle him for them. And yes, I understand this is a parody of Pokemon, and writing the character who's supposed to be a hero as a villain would work, but then Johnny and his sisters try to cheat in the battle by stealing the storage cubes that Blast Ketchum has, only for him to have anticipated that during the rematch and switched them himself. They go home, and Blast Ketchum ends up getting teleported back with them. The end. Okay, in the last Johnny Test episode on the chopping block, but believe me, this episode is far from over, is past and present Johnny. In this episode, Johnny Test finds out that his dad used to play video games, but doesn't because of some traumatic event when he was a teenager. So Johnny Test, being the douchebag that he is, goes back to the past to fix the event, but creates a reality where his mom is married to the bully's dad. His genius sisters are now stupid, but somehow that time machine tea house that they used to travel back to the 80s somehow still exists. And he and Dookie are about to cease to exist unless they return to the 80s and let everything play out the way it did. And even though that's what they do, Johnny Test's dad plays video games again, so this asshole got what he wanted, and they somehow messed reality up. The page for the just one more level trope on tvtropes.org. And believe me, I get a lot of examples out of this one. Apparently, there's an episode of Friends where Schindler becomes addicted to Miss Pac-Man to the point where he can't move his hand anymore. And yeah, since this is a sitcom, people kind of, play this off for laughs. Apparently there was an episode of Angel in which the character Spike gets addicted to Crash Bandicoot. And, well, in an episode of Star Trek, a woman actually does introduce Riker to video games, and he becomes addicted. And this actually kind of is a kick in the nuts to everything I've been saying, because it basically implies that if a woman is around video games, she's not going to have much of a reaction whatsoever. But if a man even comes within 3 inches of a video game, he's going to develop an unhealthy obsession with it. And the last one I was able to get off this site is the most insulting of all. In one episode of Frasier, Niles or however you pronounce his name, gets addicted to his nephew's video game simply because he couldn't beat the tutorial level. Okay, and to end this review, I'm going to be ripping apart an episode that comes from a way better show than Johnny Test, and that would be Grand Theft Ireland from King of the Hill. Okay, the episode starts out with, well, essentially, the Ireland school gets this new thing where they want more computers in class, and since video games and game design technically falls under that curriculum, Bobby ends up in a class where he's just sitting on his ass all day playing video games. Hank doesn't like it. He complains, and then the man teaching the class makes the game pro-pain as the means of making fun of Hank. Hank's boss, Buck Strickland, makes Hank play through the game just to see whether or not there was something in there that was a breach of copyright that they could sue over. Hank plays through the game, but doesn't find anything they could use to sue the designer of the game over, and boom, he's instantly addicted. Hank essentially lets this addiction take over his life to the point where propane, the game, is the only thing that matters to him. And to give the men in the audience one more kick in the balls, Peggy is the one to come in with the solution by essentially having the game hacked and creating an all-powerful character to come in and kill Hank's character, thus breaking him free from the trance. And that's where the episode ends. In closing, Bart Simpson, Hank Hill, and especially Johnny Test are not the everyman. There's this insane media depiction that every man is essentially addicted to playing video games, and that's just not true. Some men like comic books, some men like sports, some men like their jobs. I mean, come on. Men are the ones who built the goddamn modern world. Without men, the population of Earth would still be in the Stone Age.